This is an argument that some of you are familiar with from our colleague Noam Chomsky in the Department of Linguistics. And in fact, many of the totalitarian dictatorships of the 20th century were quite explicitly based on the doctrine of the blank slate. For example, Mao Zedong, probably responsible for 35 million deaths, wrote, "It is on a blank page that the most beautiful poems are written." Similarly, the Khmer Rouge, who massacred a quarter of their countrymen, had a slogan, "Only the newborn baby is spotless." And less horrifically, but still significant, we hear an echo of the blank slate in a quote from the planner and architect Le Corbusier, that city planners should begin with a clean tablecloth. We must build places where mankind will be reborn. And here's what Le Corbusier had in mind in terms of starting with a clean tablecloth. This is a picture of Paris, or at least it's a picture of what Paris would have looked like if Le Corbusier had been granted his wish to begin with a clean tablecloth. Why would Le Corbusier want to make Paris look like this? Well, he was an architect of a movement sometimes called authoritarian high modernism. The idea that society should be planned from the top down according to, quote, scientific principles based on a notion of human needs. Now, the problem was that they had a blank slate theory of human needs, that every human, according to the scientific calculation, needed so many gallons of water per day for bathing, so many gallons of water for drinking, so many cubic feet of air to breathe, so many square feet in which to sleep, ways to commute to work, and that was pretty much it. And so the most efficient way to satisfy those needs would be to crowd people into concrete high-rises linked by superhighways. Now, we I think, realize what went wrong with this vision, that they left out the rest of human nature, needs such as the need for intimate social interaction in public places in which people could meet, the need for green space, what E.O. Wilson called biophilia, the well-being that people feel when surrounded by nature, the effect of natural light on mood, visual aesthetics and ornamentation, the need for human scale, places in which people could feel safe and cozy. And by forgetting these needs, even though Le Corbusier didn't achieve his dream of flattening Paris and starting all over, his disciples did get carte blanche to design Brasilia, which is notorious as one of the most uninviting urban wastelands anywhere. And this theory was responsible for the so-called urban renewal projects of the late 1950s and 1960s, in which vibrant urban neighborhoods were bulldozed and replaced by concrete high-rises, freeways, and empty open plazas. Now, a related downside of the belief in perfectibility is a lack of appreciation for democracy. Another feature of 20th century totalitarian dictatorships is that they were brought in revolutions by charismatic, idealistic leaders who based their claim to authority on moral superiority to their predecessors and their rivals, who believed that their repressive measures were just temporary and would vanish as the state withered away, leaving people to coexist in a kind of romantic utopian state of anarchy. And I think it was these seemingly benevolent principles that led to many authoritarian dictatorships and indeed genocides. In contrast, democracy, which I think has had a more benign outcome, is based on a rather jaundiced theory of human nature, according to which people are eternally subjected to ambition and self-deception and delusions of moral superiority. The best statement of that comes from James Madison, who wrote, "If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary." And it's this pessimistic theory of human nature that led to democracies with their permanent checks and balances, mechanisms that were explicitly designed to counteract the innate tendencies of humans towards ambition and self-deception. Finally, a third downside of the belief in perfectibility, I think, is a distortion of human relationships, especially parenting. Now here's a quote in an article on the parenting experts that appeared in the Boston Globe a couple of years ago. And it quotes a frazzled mother who told the reporter, "I'm overwhelmed with parenting advice. I'm supposed to do lots of physical activity with my kids so I can instill in them a physical fitness habit so they'll grow up to be healthy adults. And I'm supposed to do all kinds of intellectual play so they'll grow up smart. And there are all kinds of play. Clay for finger dexterity, word games for reading success, large motor play, small motor play. I feel like I could devote my life to figuring out what to play with my kids. On top of that, I have to be a short order cook, preparing 2 or 3 meals at a time, because if I force my kids to choose between eating what's there or skipping a meal, they'll get an eating disorder." Pressures on mothers that I think our mothers did not have to face, and that have led to much of the anxiety that women feel today. Now, here's some sobering facts about parenting. Most of the studies of parenting that led to this advice are useless. They're useless because they don't control for heritability. They show that parents who talk a lot to their children have advanced language skills, that parents who spank their children have kids who grow up to be violent, that parents who talk to their teenagers have kids who are less likely to be on drugs. But what they don't even consider as an alternative hypothesis is that parents give genes to their children as well as a family environment, and the correlations, which, as we all know, don't necessarily imply causation, could merely be saying that talkative people have talkative kids and violent people have violent kids and so on. When studies are done with the proper genetic controls, that is, using twins or adoptees, the results are rather bracing. They show that siblings separated at birth end up as similar as siblings reared together. Now, remember the Malafert twins. Separated at birth, reunited in adulthood, and both of them ended up with identical contraptions on their laps in the waiting office at the patent attorney. Now, think about what would have happened if the Malafert twins had not been separated at birth and they grew up together. Well, then you might think they share all their genes and they share all their environment, so they must be even more similar. Well, in fact, they're not. Siblings separated at birth are no more different than siblings reared together. And complementing this finding is that adoptive siblings, this is the mirror image of identical twins separated at birth. The separated twins share their genes, don't share their environment. Adoptive siblings share their environment, don't share their genes, and they end up not similar at all. They're no more similar when tested as adults than 2 people plucked from the population at random. So what the study suggests is that children are not shaped by parents, but are shaped in part, though only in part, by genes, in large part by culture, both the surrounding culture of the society and the subculture that they grow up in, and also the culture of children themselves, which we condescendingly call their peer group, and in large part by chance, factors that no one really can predict in the wiring of the brain in utero and chance events as we live our lives. Now, when many people hear their findings, their first reaction is, "Oh, so you're saying it doesn't matter how I treat my children?" Well, what a question. Of course it matters how you treat your children. It's never all right to abuse or beat or belittle or neglect a child, because those are horrible things for a big, strong person to do to a helpless little person who is their responsibility. Child rearing, above all, is an ethical responsibility. Also, another simple truth that people are apt to forget is that, let's say I told you that you don't have the power to shape the personality of your spouse. Now, no one but a newlywed thinks that they can change the personality of their spouse. Nonetheless, when you hear this, your reaction isn't, "Oh, so you're saying it doesn't matter how I treat my spouse?" Well, of course it matters how you treat your spouse, because you're nice to your spouse so that you'll build a deep and satisfying and loving relationship. And that's a good reason to be nice to your kids, to have a deep and lasting and reciprocal relationship of respect and love with your children. And I think it's a sign of the somewhat pernicious effect of the blank slate that these basic human truths can be forgotten, and that people can think of parenting only as the molding or manipulation of children's personalities, And so when they're told that they can't manipulate their children's personalities, they think it doesn't matter how they treat them at all.